Good afternoon. Today we are going to talk about the CDC National Eviction Moratorium. I'm Ebony Hall, she's Vickie Bell, and we are both from Navigate Affordable Housing Partners. So Vickie, there's been a lot of concern from landlords about this new eviction moratorium.
Yes, there has. They're concerned because they see it as a postponement and not a remedy to evictions.
Yeah. So, as I was studying up for the conversation today, I found that the CDC order actually applies to up to 40 million renters across the country. And so the CARES Act moratorium, in contrast, only applied to a little over 12 million. So this is a big expansion.
Yes, it is, Ebony. It's one of the largest, they say. And because of the pandemic, we're chartering new territory. There was such a scare that people will become homeless. They have not paid their rent. They can't pay their rent. They don't have the jobs or the income. And it's involving a lot of people.
Yeah, it really is. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to talk about some of those key points. And firstly, what are the effective dates for this moratorium?
Well, the effective date for the CDC moratorium are from September the 4th, 2020, until December the 31st, 2020. And the CDC has put it out in the Federal Registry, and our viewers need to actually go out and read it for themselves because it's quite interesting. Not at all like the CARES Act, even though there are some similarities.
And we'll put a link to that in this video. So it appears that every residential property is covered under this ban.
Yes, everything but home ownership and properties that have mortgages. They're not covered under this ban. With the CARES Act, some of the mortgages were covered. And if a property has a forbearance that they're paying on, they're not covered under the CDC Act.
Okay. And I guess that goes to my next question about there are some cases where this moratorium from the CDC does not apply.
It does not. This order doesn't apply if there are any state, local, territorial preferences already out there where governors have extended the CARES Act, or they have a state eviction policy in place. It provides the same or greater level of the public health threat. The CDC moratorium is more or less coming under a health threat. Mm-hmm. So there are areas where the CDC might be minor to a state or a local.
Okay. So are the rent payments deferred at this time? And will residents have to pay all of that back at the end of the moratorium, including fees?
Now, rent payments are deferred. However, the Act says that if a resident can pay part of his rent and not all of it, they suggest that they do. And fees are included. In the CARES Act, management could not charge late fees or processing fees or collection fees, but residents are responsible for paying rent and housing payments, and unlike the CARES Act, they're also responsible for late fees, collection fees, penalties, and fees that are associated with the tenancy. Landlords may still evict residents for reasons other than non-payment of rent. Now, that's similar to the CARES Act. Mm-hmm. If it's a drug situation or any type of lease violation that does not deal with rental payments, the resident can still be evicted.
And I think the most important point here is that they are still responsible for all the rent that they are not paying at the end of the year. It doesn't just go away. So that's something that they need to be mindful of, because it could affect credit scores. It could affect your financial stability for a long time.
True. And a lot of the owners and upper management are worried because the evictions are to be December the 31st. Mm-hmm. Well, you have to give 30-day notice before they can process an eviction again. So some of them won't even occur to mid-spring. And if the residents don't have it now, then how will they have it then? And this was a thing with the CARES Act. The CARES Act ended, and the residents were still caught in the middle because there was no money to make rental payments. And what the owners of apartments and land and houses that they're renting out, what they would like to see is they would like to see some type of reform. They would like to see some type of way that the government pays the rent, opposed to postponing the rent. They'd like to see perhaps some type of rent payment act that would help the residents pay their rent, because postponing it and delaying it is not actually helping the residents. It's not helping the owners or the managers, because the owners still have taxes to pay. They still have insurance to pay. They still have mortgages on their property. So they have been going without monies to cover those expenses now ever since March, and they will be going into January of 2021 still with no funds. So it's not a win-win situation at all for anyone.
And what's scary is that we already have an affordable housing shortage and a crisis. So this could really affect the people who make affordable housing possible.
True. Very true.
So I did want to talk about that. Not every resident is covered under the CDC order. So like homeowners are not covered for this, right?
Each adult listed on the lease, the rental agreement, or housing contract must be eligible. They're not just automatically covered because they're behind in their rent. They have to fill out a declaration, a residence declaration. And this declaration form gives them eligibility. And there are about 5 things that they have to have or fill out. And they have to sign it and declare that it is truthful. And there's a penalty of perjury. It's what the order says. There's a sworn declaration, and it must be submitted to the renter's qualifying landlord or individual that has the right to evict. Now, with that being said, some of the things that they have to qualify for is they have to state in the declaration that it has the best effort to obtain all available government assistance. They've got to seek assistance either through the government or through the Catholic charities. They've got to go out and see if there are any rent monies out there that might be able to help them. So they swear that they have done this. The other thing is they either expect to earn no more than $99,000 annually, singly, in the year of 2020, or no more than $198,000 if they filed a joint tax return. They have to also state that they were not required to report any income in 2019 to the Internal Revenue Service. They also evidently have to tell if they received a stimulus check.
Oh, wow.
Also, they have to, if they're able to pay their rent, as I said earlier, they can. If they're unable to pay full rent or make a full housing payment due to substantial loss of the household income or compensation at work, or the hours were cut back, or there were layoffs, then they have to also in this declaration state that that is a process that they're going through. The one that gets me the most is they have to say that if they don't participate in the CDC program, they will become homeless. And after becoming homeless, it might cause them to have to live in a shelter or live in closed environments. And that's why the CDC stepped in, and they're trying to eliminate people becoming homeless or cramped in shelters and that type of thing to spread the COVID-19 virus.
Yeah, that's one of the things that a lot of people were wondering when they came out with this moratorium. Well, how does the CDC have the authority to do that? Well, they do have certain powers under federal law to prevent the spread of communicable diseases. And what the CDC has done is they've tied COVID-19 to the possibility of homelessness, which you mentioned, and people living in shelters, which could further contribute to the spread. So it seems like a roundabout way to get to the eviction ban, but it's to prevent the spread of COVID-19.
Yes, yes. And COVID-19, the coronavirus itself, every day I look or listen to the news, they're discovering something new about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we just don't know enough about it. Yesterday, I heard that they had heart muscles in a petri, and they put the virus on it, and the virus was eating through the heart muscles. I don't know exactly how long we will be in this, but I do know as far as housing is concerned, there really does need to be some relief for the landlords, and that will give relief to the residents. Because if the properties don't pay their mortgage, they'll be foreclosed on, and the residents are going to have to move anyway. So hopefully when the Senate comes out with whatever they're doing lately, it will provide a better situation for both parties.
And one thing I wanted to back up and ask you about is, how do residents get the form to make the declaration?
Now, right now, it's by word of mouth, or if the agencies, if the property managers and landlords ask them to fill out the form, they can get the form online, but a lot of them aren't even aware. But you know how sometimes good news spreads wisely and fastly?
Mm-hmm.
I've already had 5 calls. Only 2 of them were from residents, but the others were from managers who said that their residents had bought this piece of paper into them to tell them that they could not foreclose on them. So the word of mouth is getting around. There was no requirement, there was not a requirement in the CDC order that told managers or owners or landlords that they had to give this form. It was a requirement that the form had to be filled out before they were covered by it.
Okay. So for owner agents who are getting these forms in, and maybe they're looking at it like, I don't want to do this, there are penalties if they don't adhere to the CDC moratorium.
Yes, there are penalties on both sides, actually. There are penalties for the organization, and there's penalties for a person. The penalties for the persons is perjury. If they fill out this declaration and it comes to find out that they fibbed on it, they weren't truthful, then there are penalties for them, which is up to $100,000 or 1 year in jail or both. And then for the property itself, for the organization or the landlord, there are penalties if they find someone violating, or if they try to violate the rights of the person. There's penalties fine up to $250,000 for them, or 1 year in jail. It's recommended in our Tuesday tip that if landlords or owners find themselves receiving declarations, that they go over it thoroughly, and that they also get their legal counsel involved. That's going to be important.
And talking to some owner agents last week, they were saying before you do anything else with the form, before you engage the resident, if you do have legal representation, that maybe you should reach out to them first.
Yes, it would be a good idea. But you can't just say either, I don't want to participate in this. There is
not an option.
It's not an option. There is no option to say yes or no, I do not. It's mandatory. And when the president signed the executive order, there were 3 or 4 executive orders that he signed. This one did come up. The House and the Congress were going back and forth. And so the president decided to take it through CDC. So it went through CDC. And if you watch the news, or if you look at the news, or if you're a manager and you know, just based on your books, And what's old? There would be a lot of people that would be out in the streets. There would be a lot of children that
Mhm.
would be out in the streets. And it's just not a good thing.
No, not for anyone involved in this. So, and speaking about that, because we do care about our residents and what they're going through, and want to provide housing for them. Um, there's the concern that the ban will make it harder for local landlords and some of the larger companies to pay their mortgages, to pay their staff. And you mentioned that before. Do you have any advice for landlords during this time in dealing with this ban?
No, I don't. Uh, I was thinking some landlords will be affected more so than others. We have small companies, and quote unquote, we sometimes call them mom and pop companies.
Yep.
Their reserves were not as high, or their reserves were not as plentiful as larger companies. The larger companies will be able to stay afloat a lot longer, from the way I see it, than
Mhm.
the smaller companies. But we all have to just watch our pennies. We all have to work in the best interest of our residents, as well as the best interest of our property. Um, I would, having managed before, I would put the notice out somewhere visible for my residents to see. I will let them know that this is not a freebie. This does not mean that you don't have to pay your rent.
It
I
will
will
be.
work out agreements with them so that they could make payments. They might not be able to pay all of their rent, but maybe they can pay a part of it. In California, I think the governor passed a rule where they're asking the residents to pay at least 25%
Mhm.
of their rental payment.
And some states have used the CARES Act money to set up rent payment funds.
Yes,
So in certain states, I think Virginia has one, I think Connecticut has one. Those are two of our states in our portfolio. Encourage your residents to reach out to these government entities to see what money is available and how they can get help, so they're not stuck with this huge bill at the end of the year and go into 2021 after 2020 has been exactly like it is, with more of a debt burden on their shoulders.
that's true, Ebony.
Okay. Well, if you have any questions, you can email Vickie Bell. Her email address is vbell, that's VBELL, at navigatehousing.com. We look forward to your questions and your comments and your concerns. Just let us know what you think about this ban and how you're handling it. Vickie, anything else you want to tell them?
Nope. If we can be in service to you at Navigate, we're always there for you. Just give us a call or shoot us an email.
All right. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Thank you.